So I clicked on a video called 11 Reasons Why Adult Children Cut Off. And I was scrolling through the little sections bar. One of them said therapist. One of them said partner / in-laws. So I'm already a little skeptical of where this is going. That's going to be the entire intro. If she's going to say something dumb, I want to let her say it.
Are you wondering why adult children cut off? Well, in this video, we're going to be talking about 11 reasons why adult children cut ties.
I really am hoping she gives us the benefit of the doubt here, because a lot of these people have it, and I don't need it to be like a whole thing or even a majority, but if there's just, I just need a section of you actually being like, maybe it was the parents' fault.
And it's not just about being toxic. Hi, I'm Marie Morin. I'm a therapist and a wellness coach. Let's get started.
I don't think we've seen a wellness coach since like the very first interview we saw with Ted and the woman he was interviewing. And that one was not great. She was very big on giving out advice she herself did not follow. And whenever Ted asked her questions about her own estrangement, and Ted sucks, we didn't know that back then, but whenever Ted asked her questions, instead of answering, this is what I did, she would say something like, well, in relationships was what tends to happen, which was such a weird way to talk about your own situation.
This video lists 11 reasons why adult children cut off. We're not talking about toxic parenting. So go watch my video, Why Adult Children Cut Off Abuse, Betrayal, and Toxic Bad Parenting.
Okay. We're going to say that she has an entire different video on toxic parents. And we're going to say that this is maybe a good list of reasons why children may cut their parents off that are not necessarily the parents' fault. I don't know how you deal with the fallout. And I don't know if she's going to talk about that. I can see the first one is divorce. So I don't know if it's like, oh, they don't like it, their parents split up. They may blame one or the other. Or if she's going to go into some of the things that like Coleman has, where he talks about how like one parent turns the other one against the good parent.
Number one, divorce. Now, not every divorced couple ends up having estranged adult children. However, as a contributor, when there's a divorce, there's a lot of different things that could go on. One of them is parental alienation. And that's when one parent paints the other one in this negative light. And there's a lot of nastiness around what the other parent is about. The children get, of course, impacted by this. Another reason is that each child going through a divorce or adolescent experiences their own feelings and interpretation about what has happened. So it can impact them. And the likelihood is very high when there's a divorce that there will be estrangement going on.
We've talked about that a lot in previous videos because it gets brought up a lot. And my opinion of it and the way that I speak of it has pretty much stayed the same. The issue that I have with a lot of these problems, and I'm hoping that she gives us examples, is that we don't have a lot of examples, that we have a lot of ideas, a lot of this might happen, but not a lot of this is actually happening. And when we are given examples like Dr. Coleman himself or Diane or Breakdancing Dad, and I could just be looking in the wrong places, but I haven't really found any of the opposite, it doesn't apply to them. So Breakdancing Dad is the one that said, my ex-wife is turning everyone against me. My ex-wife turned my kids against me. And again, to an extent, that can make sense. To an extent, for their situation, Maddie has absolutely been like, oh, maybe my mom didn't tell me about these medical bills that my dad did pay. But then you get into the other situations and the other examples of why they may not be, or why they may be estranged. Like, okay, cool. Sorry, my mom did say some bad things about you. How do you explain these things that you've said yourself, though? How do you explain the misogyny? How do you explain the whole Trump thing? How do you explain being a weird crypto dude? Because that's all stuff you've said yourself. How do you explain telling people you're being targeted by the government? If you got rid of the part where Breakdancing Dad's wife did say bad things about him and did turn his children against him, You still have someone that is not a good parent. So we don't have an example of someone just being straight turned by their ex-spouse. I have one from TikTok, but that ended up working out.
Number 2, pressure from in-laws or partners.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of switching now. If you have pressure from your in-laws or your partner to become estranged from your parent, it's going to go one of two ways. Either your parent is abusive in some way and they're able to see this and they're like, hey, you have to do this for yourself. Or your partner / your mother / father / person-in-law is then abusive and is trying to strip your family away from you. Again, the examples that we have are the first one. I would love to be told or given an example. I would love to have somebody come on and be like, no, actually, I was this side of it. Because I'm not just making up examples. We have Dawn, right? TikTok's estranged mom. And her whole thing was, after I had been a terrible, terrible person for so long because of my concussion, and after I had said these things to my daughter-in-law that I shouldn't have said, my daughter-in-law forced my son to cut me off. So all I want really is like, you're allowed to say these things, you're allowed to have these ideas, absolutely. But I think you should back them up. Because when we find examples where things like this do happen, it's never from your perspective. It's always from the other one. It's never, oh, no, my son cut me off because his new wife is actually abusive. It's, oh, my son cut me off because he doesn't like the way I treat his wife.
So when there's either a toxic or controlling partner that's married your child or is with your adult child, this stress from them can create a situation where there's estrangement. Pressure from that person on your adult child can lead to estrangement, particularly when there is a very close-knit family. This can be a threat to your adult child's partner. And then there's this pushing of separating and becoming their own unit. That is a contributor to estrangement. Number 3 is the presence of mental illness and addiction.
I'm repeating myself because these are all just like the same point. There are issues that we've come across, that we've brought up, that we've talked about, where the parents in this situation were not in the right. There are examples of like parents trying so hard to hold on to their children, specifically on things like intervention, where their children do have drug problems. But those parents are not the ones who are estranged. Those are not the ones that we're talking about. I guess I want to hear what she has to say about this.
Presence of mental illness and addiction. So if your adult child or the parent has mental illness and addictions, this complicates and becomes a contributor to estrangement. What happens is in addictions or mental illness, there's a lot of stress around the person with the illness or the addiction and the uncertainty of what they're going to do, the pressures they place on each other. And there's a lot of conflict that happens. So there's a likelihood and a potential. And this is one of the contributors of estrangement.
With the mental health and addiction, I'm probably not going to say too much about that. We've talked about it multiple times. And also, like, you just have to agree that sometimes people's mental health may strain your relationship. And also, there are too many causes for addiction that we just cannot dive into it and say anything too smart unless they're going to be super, super broad. Their therapist, I'm going to assume that there are more bad parents than bad therapists in these situations. And if your child's therapist is looking at your situation and going, your parent might be an issue, maybe nod your head and figure out what that issue is and try to solve it before they move on to, you're never going to fix this situation between you and your parent, consider estrangement.
Their therapist. So the information provided in this video comes from 3 resources. Dr. Joshua Coleman's book.
Okay. Nope. Figured out what side she's on. We've talked about Dr. Coleman before. Dr. Coleman's entire philosophy on this is if you're an estranged parent, it's your kid's fault. It's your kid's fault, and they can't see that. So your job is to lie to them to get them back into your life.
Kylie Agalias and Dr. Carl Pilmer's book. The description box below will have these resources, but what's important to note about this one, their therapist, is that it's normal for the adult child to go into therapy. And in fact, it's become so easy and unstigmatized for people to go to therapy when they're having difficulties or when they need support and they feel stressed. But if they go to a therapist and they sit there and they talk through their version, and this is their perspective, it's normal and natural for the therapist to hear their side and listen, genuinely listen to what they're saying. If the adult child is reporting things like challenging relationship, a lot of stress, feeling very uncomfortable, feeling like their parent is not satisfied with them or is very demanding, it's normal for the therapist to help the adult child recognize that this relationship is not good for them and that the possibility of cutting off is not the end of the world and is actually an option for them. When it's communicated in therapy that their well-being is being threatened and they don't feel good, they're very stressed because of the parental adult-child relationship, it's okay and natural for the therapist to encourage a movement away from the relationship with the parents.
She is the first person to immediately not challenge the idea of a therapist encouraging these children to protect themselves. So maybe I was wrong. Maybe she's referencing the book, but not necessarily defending it. I don't know. We're not there yet. My chair keeps squeaking. If your side of the story with your parents causes your therapist to go, oh, yeah, maybe you don't need them around. Maybe you don't need them around. If I go to my therapist and talk about, oh, yeah, every time I, spoke to one of my parents as a kid, they beat me. And now they just don't understand why I don't talk to them. And my therapist was like, maybe you just should never talk to them again. And I'd be like, yeah, that makes sense. And if one of my parents was like, oh, that darn therapist, nope, that's not their fault.
The thing about this is that it's just one side of the picture. Now, this is not the optimal, but it is possible that an adult child can visit their therapist, talk about the experiences that they've had, the uncomfortableness around their parents, them feeling that it's an unmanageable situation, and a therapist can and may have actually suggested that it's a good idea for them to cut off.
In talking about this being one-sided, you don't need both sides of a relationship for a relationship to be dissolved. You just don't. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's with your parents. I don't care if it's a romantic relationship. I don't care what kind of relationship it is. It could be a job. If you are not happy in that space, you are allowed to be the person that ends it. It does not have to be an amicable experience. It does not have to be one that is agreed upon by both sides. You're allowed to just be like, this is not healthy. Don't want to be a part of it.
And number 5 is having too close of a relationship. So what this means is the parent and the adult child are so close, there is no separation between where one begins and the other one begins. They're kind of enmeshed in this relationship of very, very close behaviors. They're on the phone a lot. They're communicating a lot. At some point, the adult child can begin to feel very uncomfortable. Their relationship with their parent is just overwhelming or too much. The adult child may be feeling a lot of angst. They're very close with their parent. Maybe they feel like they need some space and they don't know how to say it. And in order to create some kind of boundary for their well-being, because being overly close and being enmeshed means that there's not a lot of boundaries. Anything goes.
This reminds me a lot of Colt from 90 Day Fiancé. Colt lives with his mom as an adult. He has a job, doesn't need to, but him and his mom are tied together. They're best friends, do everything together. It blows up eventually, and he says things to her like, you think I need you, but I don't. And then she kind of backfires and goes, no, I need you. And it gets really sad and everyone's crying except him. Colt does not find problems with his relationship with his mother unless he's in a romantic relationship, and that gets gross. He doesn't clean, he doesn't cook, he doesn't do any of that. So whenever he finds a woman to replace all the things his mom does for him, he finds a reason to have problems with his mom. That's disgusting. If I were the mom, that's one of the times where I look at the mom, Debbie, and I go, it sucks that you feel like you need your son, because that is a weird relationship to be in. And Colt's just like overall a weird person, and so it's easy to like not like him. Debbie has her own issues, but also like they're both weird. He's weird with the women that he ends up with, and so Debbie deserves better. That's one. Them two specifically, Colt and Debbie, is where I go, she deserves better. It was one time where I understand the parent wanting to be a parent, and then Colt just like constantly trying to find women to do all the things that she does for him, plus have sex 5 times a day.
You can call whenever you want. You could say whatever you want. And for the individuation, for the separateness of the adult child, it's important for them to feel whole, like they can make their own decisions. So cutting ties is one way that this helps the adult child gain their individualness. One of the things that happens when adult children and parents are very, very close is that the lack of boundaries becomes a place where parents exert a lot of control. And even if the parents mean well, so this is really important because I'm not sure parents mean harm towards their adult child when they're trying to guide them wisely. However, for the adult child, this is really not healthy. They need to be making their own decisions, even important ones that might not always be what the parent believes is right.
We talk a lot about how what you want as a parent is to be their parent until they don't need one, and then you want to transition into being their friend. This, again, going back to Cole and Debbie, are two people who were never separated from being parent, child, and then also best friends. It would be entirely different to watch their relationship if they were two adults now who happen to be related and not her mothering him around. Her cooking, cleaning, making sure he's okay, with the added on, but we're best friends and we do everything together. I think that has definitely stunted his growth as a person. I don't blame her for it because in her situation, they lost Colt's father pretty early on. So they kind of glued themselves to each other. But I think as a person, when you're growing up, right, you want to be somewhat independent. Even if you want to live with your mom, even if you still want to have some relationship with her, I don't know that you want to be mothered your entire life. And so I think Cole should have grown out of that before it gets to the point of it being a problem where they explode at each other and have to separate.
And it's respectful for the parents to allow their children to make, their adult children, their grown children to make decisions. And so being too close and having this overly controlling parent does not work and is a contributor to estrangement.
What she said was control is a contributor to estrangement, and she's right. What we talk about is some of the things that parents or people don't always realize constitute control. And it's things like cleaning your child's room when they're an adult and they ask you not to, or just in general, I guess, cleaning your child's room when they ask you not to, doing things for them when they ask you not to. Because one, it infantilizes them. It also makes them feel like they don't have room to kind of do it themselves, which is what I just said the same thing twice, but that's all it is. I think there's a lot of things you don't realize are controlling. And I think that's okay. I think you, whether it's in a romantic relationship or in a parental one, whatever it is, have to be open to your partner in that relationship going, hey, this is controlling. You need to stop. And you need to just go, yeah, okay, whatever it is. Even if it's cleaning for them when they don't ask you to. And that's what it is. It's when they don't ask you to. If you clean for your partner and they like that, that's part of your relationship, that's great. If your mom cleans for you and you want that, cool, not my business. But when you're setting boundaries that they're ignoring by doing things that are nice, then it's an issue.
Number 6 is differing values and lifestyle choices. So when there's disagreements of how an adult child ought to control their life or live their life, there's a lot of angst naturally. So the adult child and these differing values can be about partner choices, gender, sexuality, and even political thoughts that can create a lot of angst between.
She seems a lot calmer than Dr. Coleman, right? She doesn't seem like she's blaming the kids necessarily. She may just be referencing some of the things that he had to say. However, I do think some of these word choices matter. You can't let the parents believe that things like sexuality are a choice. They're not. And if you are a parent who's cutting off their kids or being a bad parent, forcing your kid to cut them off because of their sexuality, oh, dude, I don't know how to tell you, you're just a homophobe, and I would also cut you off.
That can create a lot of angst between parents and adult children. But for adult children, when they're pressed with their parent, perhaps pressuring or pushing that this is not a good choice, whatever that choice is, it can lead to estrangement.
About politics, of the people who are just estranged parents, we have Dawn, we have Diane, and we have Breakdancing Dad. Breakdancing Dad and Diane are both huge Trumpers, and you can see it in the way they speak, right? Breakdancing Dad spent 2 hours talking about how he doesn't think Maddie's actually gay. That's not his business. But he spent a long time going, my daughter's not gay, she's doing it for attention. That's stupid. Not any of your business. Diane did the whole I'm not even that political thing, but then kept bringing up things that were obviously politics, or she kept being like, those darn DEI hires. Dawn is the only one that has been left leaning so far. And so she brought it up for a second. She was like, that one wasn't a problem. We're all fine there. The problem was her not respecting her daughter-in-law. And I don't think that was the first problem. I think that may have just been the final one.
So Joshua Coleman talks about this societal change. But what's happening is that adult children want their autonomy. They want their own agency. They want to be able to make their decisions, be respected by others, especially their parents. And they want to feel validated to do what they think is best.
A lot of the comments on videos from the estranged parents that are supportive of them are people like, oh, they just want to be validated. Well, they cut me off because I didn't validate them. Validation isn't always like an agreement. Validation is sometimes just a head nod. There are plenty of times when you may say something accidentally that may seem invalidating. That's not what we're talking about. These parents are very hypocritical in the way they speak to each other and then about their children, because they speak about their children and then they go, I didn't want to validate all these ideas that they had, and so they cut me off. But then they get into these echo chambers of our kids are the worst, our kids are just spoiled, and they validate each other. And if you don't validate them in those group chats that they have, they cut you out. They kick you from the group chat. And they're not going to get that. And that is unfortunately the people we're talking about. It's all that. It's all just these people are unreasonable. They don't have any self-awareness. Does that apply to all of them? No. Like anything else, there's going to be outliers. That is unfortunately just not who we are talking about.
This societal change towards individualism and autonomy pushes the parents' values out and away from them, cutting off in order to make room for their own.
What values? What values do the parents have that are pushed out by children wanting to have their own lives? Because a lot of children still take care of their parents, still see their parents pretty often, just happen to live their lives as well. So I don't know what those values are. And I wish she would have given some examples because I just don't. I have no idea. If she had said familial values, they just don't want to take care of their parents like we did. Sure, but there's like so many little answers to that. If you're a good parent, I think for the most part, your kids will find a way to take care of you later on. It's definitely a lot harder now financially to take care of people than it probably was for your generation or the generation before. That applies to you.
Number 7 is unmet expectations. And for the parents listening right now, it's probably unnecessary for me to describe what that means to you, because I'm sure as a parent, you feel an unmet expectation. But let's think about what adult children would like. So if an adult child is looking for a degree of support and respect, meaning that you're honoring their wishes, you're respecting that they have a right to their own opinion, you're heeding what they're telling you, and you're not looking to change who they are, as an expectation of you behaving a certain way, and your expectation is that they respect you no matter what, even if you miss the mark. And when they do something, you're not there for them. It's very confusing and hurtful. So adult children have expectations that parents don't necessarily meet.
I get that they're your kids. I do. And they're always going to be your children. But once they're adults, you should treat them with the respect of them being adults. They're going to mess up, whatever. Everyone does. You have to treat people with the respect of understanding that they have their own ideas and values and are their own people. Now, do you have to agree with those things? No. But that's when we come into this situation where if you don't agree with someone's values and they're large enough or important enough to where you don't want them in your life, that's valid. And one person is probably going to protest that in the relationship, but I don't know how to take their side. The examples that we have, again, because we always have examples, and I wish that they did too, are Dawn's children probably expecting her to respect them and their spouses. Didn't happen. Diane's children probably expecting... Diane's daughter is very, not what two conservative parents would want their daughter to be. So her daughter probably held the expectation of, hey, don't vote for Trump because he actively wants to enact policies that hurt people like me. And if you need that to be more specific, women, that's probably the only one that matters because that's 51% of the population. You could probably keep going from there. We can keep going from there. But that's already more than half the population. So she set this expectation of, I want you as my parents to do what would protect me and my sister. They didn't meet that one. I think that is reasonable. I think that is a good reason to be like, I don't need them in my life. And if Diane has that value of, no matter what, we're family, you don't cut us off. Well, you should have put, no matter what, we're family and we take care of each other above that. And you didn't do that.
Now, this doesn't have to do with what you give them in terms of material things. This has to do with what you give them in terms of time, support, being there respectfully. So there's a social norm that if we give to someone, there's going to be some reciprocity. For adult children, that holds as well. If they're giving to their parents, showing up for them, being there to be helpful and supportive, and then when it's their turn to receive, parents aren't there, it could be very hurtful.
You should teach your children to be the people you want them to be. If you want your children to celebrate you, you should show them how to be celebrated. If you're that parent who like, oh, I'm going to throw all my kids' birthday parties because I want them to throw me birthday parties when they're older, that makes sense to me. I don't know how hard I would hold that expectation, but it is entirely different to be the parent who's like, well, you don't do this for me, so I wouldn't do it for you. You are the one that has to do it first. You need to teach your kids to be the people you want them to be, whatever that is.
Number 8 is parenting styles. There's all different kinds of parents. There are parents that are very unloving, distant. There are those that are very loving, very close, very on top of their adult child.
If you're one of those parents who's very distant and unloving, I don't get how you're surprised when your kid's the same way towards you. I don't get it at all. If the thing about parenting styles is that with previous generations, we now get in these conversations about whether or not hitting your kid, right, which we would call abuse, is a parenting style. And as someone who was beaten pretty regularly by both their parents, it's not. It's not. Like, not once have I ever thought to do that to a partner, and I don't think I'd ever do that to a child. I won't ever have to know. Don't want kids, but I'm pretty set on the whole, like, yeah, that was pretty abusive. Not a parenting style.
Very on top of their adult child and everything that they do. But these differing parenting styles can impact. Remember earlier we spoke about someone that's too close, maybe a little bit of a helicopter, someone that's on top of their adult child's every move. Well, what about the other end of the spectrum, when a parent is somewhat distant, they're not present for them. They seem to be off doing their own thing, and the adult child could use some emotional support, and the parent is not there for them. So parenting styles that occur in childhood naturally participate in what the adult child is feeling when he gets older. So talk about latchkey kids that were basically raising themselves. The parent was off working, doing the best they could. However, the adult child, when they were a kid, was not really being supportive. They didn't have anybody in their corner. Their parent wasn't there for them. This type of hurtfulness that the perception of the adult child holds is a contributor to estrangement.
That's going to go both ways, right? Like if you are somebody who, as a parent, had to work all the time and couldn't be around for their child, your child is going to probably go one of two ways, right? Either they're going to see that and go, my mom, my dad, my parent worked so hard for me and I owe it to them to do the same. Or you're going to go, my parent was never there. Oh, it's so hard. And I just don't know. I think that you'll come to appreciate the moments that are shared between you two during the time that you do have together, right? I think for the parents that do work really, really hard for their child, come home and then just ignore them because they're tired, it's probably easier for them, for the kids to now be estranged versus the parents who work 2 jobs, come home and still have time to be parents or still force themselves to have time to be parents.
And there's also this piece of it being fashionable for parents to be blamed for the woes of the adult child. Now, naturally, parents are not perfect. They do things, they miss the mark. But in terms of making the parent the responsible party for the difficulty and the challenges that the adult child is experiencing is something that's a contributor for estrangement. One other piece of this poor parenting that's an influence in creating an environment for estrangement is this imperfect parenting. Well, let's flesh that out a little bit. So parents are going to be imperfect, but the measurement on the lens that an adult child could see their parent as missing the mark frequently, not being there for them. This is also participating in how the adult child views the relationship and is a contributor to estrangement. Number 9 is money. So money is definitely an issue for adult child parental estrangement. It could be who gets the money? When do they get the money? Where is the money? What is your parent doing with the money? I think that perspective of where the money goes and who gets it is thought about more by the parents and the kids themselves, because all of the children we've seen so far who have been cut off or disinherited are all like, yeah, that's what I expected. No big deal. But a lot of the parents hold it as like some sort of bargaining chip, or like, oh yeah, you can't cut me off, otherwise I'm going to cut you off financially. Or like it's their immediate reaction. My kid hasn't talked to me, so they're not getting any of this inheritance. That'll show them. And I think it's because like that's really all they care about. Like they care a lot more about money than like any actual relationship that they had with their child. If your immediate, and we've talked about this, if your immediate reaction to your child cutting you off is to punish them, whether that's by taking their inheritance or cutting them off financially or whatever. If your immediate reaction is to punish them, that gives a lot of insight as to who you were as a parent. And it makes sense to me. What is your parent doing with the money? I don't like using the word because it's so offensive to adult children, but the idea of entitlement, like, hey, I'm your kid, I'm entitled to get something. And the parent maybe is on a fixed income and they've saved a certain amount of money, and the adult child believes that they're entitled to get this money, loan, or whatever, and the parent puts a kibosh on it, and the kid is like beside themselves.
This is, again, something that we just don't have examples of. We've had plenty of examples of the children on this end going, yeah, literally do not care about being disinherited. I expected that. I don't have any examples of the children being like, oh, you're not going to leave me money? Well, then I'm going to stop talking to you. Not a single one. And I wish that that was, again, like plenty of the other ones I've asked for, I wish that was something they could just show. Like, here's an example of this. But it's just ideas.
Conflict happens. You get the picture because you probably have heard stories about this. And then there's the idea of someone getting an inheritance. Let's say the parent gets an inheritance from their parents passing, and the adult child is like, great, can I get in on that? And the parent isn't having it for whatever reason. And then there's the idea of adult children expecting that there's unending support.
Yeah, no, exactly. He made an entire video about cutting Maddie out of his will. The inheritance, the grandparent inheritance is interesting because like the grandparent dies, leaves money to the parent. The child goes, hey, can I get some of that? And the parent's like, nope. As a parent, I can't imagine not wanting to take care of my children, especially if that's a substantial number. Even now, like if I won the lottery, I'd give so much money to my friends. I would. I can't imagine having a good amount of money and not being willing to share some of it with my children. I understand the notion of wanting your kids to make their own money. I don't understand the people who have been like, my money is mine. When I die, it'll go to something else. It's not my children. Because for a lot of us, like the idea of generational wealth is incredible. If I could set myself up to have children and for their children and for their children and for their children to be financially successful through me, yeah, cool. I don't want kids, but if I did, that's something I'd think about. I don't really see a reason to be like, cool, got money from my dead parents. You can't have any of it.
Adult children expecting that there's unending support. Perhaps they're having a really tough go of being independent financially. And
also, like, this is just not geared towards people like me because my parents never had money. And so I've never had to be like, oh, I wish they would give me, or I wish they would pay for Like I don't blame my mom for the money she has and hasn't had. So that was never something I've thought about.
And they keep asking parents for help, not paying back loans or maybe paying back sporadically. And the parent is like, no, I have to create a boundary now. And the adult child is beside themselves or upset and there's conflict. So these are all contributors. And number 10 is communication problems and errors. And so let's talk about this, because in many families, there's this lack of resolution. Families don't really like to talk about things. Some of them have the habit of just sweeping things under the carpet and pretending like everything is okay. And then there's families that air all of their grievances, and there's a lot of intensity, and people argue and fight, and people leave and say things that ought not be said. And there's these unresolved conflicts. This could happen when they're children. It can continue into adolescence and then into adulthood. And this type of dramatic and tense conflict that's just lingering for the adult child can be so stressful and unmanageable.
As the adult in this situation, you should never say something hurtful out of a reaction. You should never say something that you have to be like, oh no, I didn't mean that. Or, oh no, sorry, I was mad. Never, 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 not once. If you're saying things to your child that are so bad that they have to hold on to them through their childhood, adolescence, into adulthood, that's your fault. That is your fault as the parent. If you spend their entire childhood telling them that they're not enough, when they cut you off and go, you made me feel like I wasn't enough, your fault. Again, I'm not very reactionary. Like, I don't ever, like, nobody makes me mad and then I say something I don't mean. Nope. Do I say things that I do mean that are mean? Yeah, absolutely. But that's entirely different. And also, I don't have children.
That for them, within them, the stress of being around family is way too much to bear. And so it creates an atmosphere and a contributor to estrangement. One of the things that adult children say in this arena of communication problems and errors is that they wish their parents would take responsibility.
Yes.
And it's a habitual thing where a parent does something and offends the adult child. And rather than saying, oh, I'm so sorry, their response is some type of denial, some type of defensiveness, and there's never any resolution. And what adult children yearn for is for parents to finally say, hey, I'm sorry, I apologize. And adult children really would love for parents to go to that step.
We have talked about that so many times, and I don't think we have to repeat too much of it. Sometimes, as an adult, if what you have to do is just go, yeah, that was my fault, sorry, you're good. That fixes so many problems. The issue is by the time that a lot of these parents get to that point, they've caused that problem or they've made that issue. They've done something bad a million times. And at that point, putting one Band-Aid over it doesn't help anyone. It's not that hard to look at the people you care about, go, sorry about that, won't do it again. And then you don't do it again. And if you do, if you're constantly lashing out at these people, consider that either you have an issue that you need to go and resolve or you don't care about them that much. And if you do care about them, you really, really do, go resolve that issue for them. Oh, I have an anger problem. Go get that fixed.
And number 11 is family secrets. So family secrets are those places where people have to be hush, hush, or something very important wasn't told to the adult child.
What is your biggest family secret? Let me know.
This type of secrecy, it makes for the adult child to come when they finally find out, which happens sometimes. They find out some secret about their childhood or their parent or even about them that they weren't told, gives them a sense of lack of trust and betrayal. And it's very, very hurtful for them. So family secrets, when things are not revealed, when there's no honesty and there's trust that's broken and betrayal, is very, very difficult on the adult child. Another piece of that is that adult children maybe have to keep a secret about somebody in the family who has an addiction or a mental illness. And everybody is hush hush about this family member or something that's happened. And it's a lot of stress for the adult child, and that can create an atmosphere that contributes to estrangement. Well,
the family secrets thing could be like almost anything, but things that may affect the child more than anything are like finding out you're adopted, finding out one of your siblings isn't actually your sibling, finding out that your dad isn't your dad, finding out that your mom was cheating on your dad the whole time, your dad was cheating on your mom the whole time. Like there are so many things that could happen and could have been withheld from you where you find out and you go, I can't talk to my parents now. What's her name? Marie Morin was a lot more tolerable than people like Dr. Coleman. And I think it's because she may not be entirely on their side, but she took the time to kind of explain some of these things more so. So the comments that she seems to be like hearting in her section seem to be from like the adult children. Anyway, she seems much more tolerable than some of the estranged parents or the people who are on that side of things. She just wanted to explain things, and I think she did a good job of listing some of them out. She did reference Dr. Coleman's book, and we were pretty anti Dr. Coleman, but it doesn't seem like she necessarily took his points, more so just listed out some of the things that he had to say. So who knows? Well, I might look more into her. I can see she has something on estranged grandparents, so we might get into that, but I think that's going to be it.